Hello and good evening, I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad, Kuttan.
You're watching Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Tonight on the show, we want to think about the question of whether ecotourism contributes towards conservation of threatened habitats and species, or does it add to the exploitation of the natural world? Joining us on the show tonight, we have two guests to help us think through this issue. Professor Amran Hamzah, he is the first and only Malaysian to be elected regional councillor for the International Union for Conservation of Nature, or IUCN. That is the world's oldest and largest global environmental organization, which looks at the conservation of the natural world and the sustainable use of natural resources. Our second guest tonight, we have Justine Vaz. She's General Manager of the Habitat Foundation, which is a charitable trust based in Penang, supporting the conservation of biodiversity. Welcome to the show. It's good to have you both here.
Thank you for inviting us.
I think before we get into this topic, we need to start with the basics. Let's begin with the basic concepts of ecotourism and conservation, and how do the two intersect? If I may begin with Amran, let's begin with you.
Yeah, go back to school.
Thank you, Melisa.
Let him do the basics first.
There have been so many definitions. There are so many definitions of ecotourism, but I think the basic is about traveling to pristine areas, undisturbed areas, and what separates it from nature-based tourism, which is another variant of ecotourism, nature-based tourism or green tourism, is that you have the elements of benefiting the local communities. So the tourists might want to enjoy the pristine nature. So it could be wildlife, could be the ecosystem, fauna and flora, and that is very important to the tourist experience. But at the same time, if it doesn't benefit local communities, then it cannot qualify as ecotourism. And the types of ecotourism has also evolved over the years. Many years ago, when I first started doing a consultancy project planning for ecotourism in Perlis State Park, the idea of an ecotourist is someone, who is a tree hugger, wears shorts, and is very, very
That's
concerned.
A stereotype.
Yeah, stereotype.
Okay.
But now you have soft ecotourism, you have hard ecotourism. In between, there is what is called eco-adventure. Soft ecotourism means bird watching, trekking, that doesn't require active participation. There are some tourists who are not ecotourists by nature in terms of their preference. They might just come for leisure, but if there is something near and not very challenging, then they would participate in this kind of soft ecotourism. But the other extreme is the hard ecotourism, mountain climbing, caving. There's also a demand for that. But I would like to stress that the wonderful opportunity lies in eco-adventure and special interest tourism, because this is where the youth, the millennials, they like this kind of experiences. That is challenging. It could be also, something very, very tough, and it raises the status. You go back. I've done this.
It's bragging rights.
Yeah. Bragging rights. Yeah, it's an outbound school. So, but I want to know, where does this push up against the concerns of conservationists and those who are looking actually to protect environments from the invasion of human beings, who often have a negative impact on these environments? Where does that definition come up against the demands of conservationists?
Okay, because the ecotourists are also sharing the same resources that conservationists are trying to protect. For example, a marine park, they have corals. In forests, you have the wildlife, fauna and flora. These are very crucial in terms of conservation, that we protect, and we do not open it to mass tourism. We do not open it to, kinds of tourism that are incompatible. So when you have ecotourism, then you have to follow certain principles, meaning that low density, following carrying capacity, threshold limits, and there should be visitor management in terms of policies put in place so that we will reduce the impact. So it's very crucial that we are using the resources that are available in terms of, especially Malaysia and the wealth of our rainforest.
Right.
But how do we do it without causing negative impacts?
Okay, having said that, Justine, are ecotourism players, the service providers of ecotourism, are they on the same side with conservationists?
Generally, yes, I would say so. I think one of the things that we've learned over the years is that people who are involved in ecotourism are not there to make money, really. It's, there are easier ways to make money. Ecotourism is a really hard nut to crack. You have to have the magic of the three things, right? You have to have well-curated natural resources. You have to have demonstrable benefits to local communities who must be involved in a meaningful manner, i.e., they can't just be employees. They have to be engaged with culturally, be involved in decision making, and ideally, what we hope to move through with responsible tourism and sustainable tourism, possibly be business owners themselves, which all are sort of interlinked through the energy that's created and economic activity driven by tourism. The last one is about impact, right? So everyone has to somehow reduce their impact. So again, ecotourism is just a response to the damage from mass tourism and damage in all those areas, environmental, social, and so on.
Justine, who's monitoring, who's keeping those standards, who's talking to the local community so that we know that they are in fact happy? And I've been to places like the Mulu National Park, and perhaps it's a beautiful park, but the saddest part of it was actually the native village. And I think, I don't know that's everybody's experience of it, but who keeps track, who makes sure these standards are met?
It depends. Now, Mulu is an interesting case, of course, because it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It has very stringent requirements in terms of local participation. So it is actually, it is considered to be one of the better parks because there has been a heavy amount of training and inclusion of Penang and Berawan communities there. In fact, the award-winning nature guide from Malaysia is actually a Penang young man called Henry who has come through that system. So Mulu is a very special case. I think there will always be a spectrum of relative success, and one of the key principles is you keep working at it, but through the web forum that we had last week, we see that many people who are in ecotourism are really dedicated to that. And there is a very strong peer pressure, I suppose. If you self-identify as an ecotourism provider, right? Isn't there a lot of pressure from the ecotourism world?
So
right?
the other players within that industry will kind of make sure to keep
and
you
your
on
customer.
track.
I mean, the person who's going to come to you is going to have invisible checklists, making sure whether you are the real deal or some fly-by-night operation.
Okay, all right. Well, we're going to take a quick break, but let's come back and continue this conversation with Justine and Amran in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned to Consider This.
Okay.
Hi, if you've just joined us, you're watching Consider This. I'm Melisa. Idris. With me is Sharaad, Kuttan. We're chatting tonight to Justine Vaz. She's the GM of the Habitat Foundation. Also, Professor Amran Hamzah, who is the Regional Councilor for the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Amran, you wanted to weigh in on something Justine said before the break?
Sure. It has to be said that most ecotourism occur within protected areas or national parks. So under the IUCN category, you have category 2, which is called national parks. And for a national park, the main responsibility is conservation. But there is an element of ecotourism. This is where it will offer opportunities for visitors to enjoy what is conserved in terms of fauna, flora, and ecosystems. Now, this is where the conflict sometimes lies, because many of the park managers, they were trained as zoologists, they were trained as ecologists, and they do not have the training to manage visitors. So something different from what they've been exposed to. all the while they've been asked to conserve the forest. They're doing a wonderful job. So in our agencies, Pelitan, Forestry, and they are all the custodians of national parks. So Mulu, for example, is under the Sarawak Forestry Corporation, and Kinabalu Park, and so on. So when you have ecotourism, then this is where you need planning and management. So in 1996, the Ministry of Tourism at the time then commissioned a national ecotourism plan that was developed by WWF. It was a wonderful plan. It's very comprehensive. It's more like a manual. It tells you how to develop trails, eco-lodges. But 1996, at the time, the industry wasn't ready. So the understanding of what ecotourism is, the buy-in was very low. So then 20 years later, in 2016, the MOTAC, Ministry of Tourism, then commissioned us, the team that I led, to develop the second national ecotourism plan for Malaysia. And this is the blueprints to guide the development of ecotourism for the next 10 years. So this is where the monitoring, the studies done to look at the impacts, the principles, how do you manage this are being captured in all the recommendations. And that blueprint is used now to develop ecotourism to another level. Because one of the most difficult challenges is how do you make money out of ecotourism? So,
yeah, and I want to come back to that issue of making money and what price point is actually good for the environment, but maybe not good for equal access principles. And there's the issue around national parks. As you mentioned national parks earlier, because our national park system also, the state parks and the federal parks, as it were, also problematic. I visited Ulu Muda, not too very long ago. Yeah, brilliant to look at the megafauna, the elephants in particular. But again, you have these conflicts over questions of, say, and this is a concept I think that's quite controversial, is carrying capacity. You mentioned it earlier. Who decides? And is the science of carrying capacities even something that everybody agrees with within the conservation field? What is the way forward, Amran? Is there a consensus locally about those issues? Yeah,
I'll tell you a secret. I did carrying capacity as a topic of my PhD many years ago. After 1 year, I totally gave up and I changed the topic because it's a very beautiful concept, but it's very difficult to implement. But I'm fully supportive of that concept because you must have numbers that you put, as the limits. But more important is that what do you do with carrying capacity? If they are just numbers, the magic numbers, as you call it, to say you do not allow a certain number of tourists or divers, but then it doesn't come with the management strategies, and there's no use of carrying capacity. So it's supposed to be a tool, and for the tool to be effective, then the plan should comprise of strategies. How do you manage? How do you reduce impacts? Who's going to, how is the governance and so on. So in Malaysia, unfortunately, there are lots of carrying capacity studies, but they are done only to come up with numbers, not as a tool to help the management of tourism.
How does carrying capacity affect cost? Justine.
Okay. Well, Ulu Muda, let's take that example, right? Ulu Muda is one of those very fragile environments where carrying capacity must necessarily be kept low, all right? It doesn't matter how much you're paying, the carrying capacity is just going to have to be what it is. But of course, yes, it depends what the people are prepared to pay. Now, Habitat Penang Hill, where we are, is a very well-curated park. It's got paved things and so on. It can handle a lot more foot traffic, spaced out over a period of time with no major impacts. Although we do have a magic number in our heads, but it's because we know that the setting is such that it can handle that. Not also for the impact on the environment, but for the quality of the experience for the visitor, right? You don't want to be going to places with thronging with people. That's going to not be a memorable experience. So there has to be some magic, some balance behind that. Yeah, so Ulu Muda, it has to be, it's like Sipadan Island, right? I remember going to Sipadan when tourists were allowed to sleep and be on the island. It was a small village, and I went with the wildlife ranger to go around the island, which you can walk around at night. And there were tourists hiding behind trees because they were wanting to see the turtle landings, which of course you had to go and shoo them away, right? Is just absolutely wrong. And it's very obvious in those cases. So it depends. It depends where
so
you are.
So I'm interested in the architecture, the management that you say, right? There's strategies, right? So, okay, put aside carrying capacity as a kind of abstract idea.
Sure.
Yeah.
The question is, how are parks, if they're the setting for much of ecotourism, are they being managed well? Are they being put together in a way that makes sense from an ecological point of view, from a conservation point of view? Ulu Muda has a problem because it's actually contiguous series of ecosystems, right? And one of the problems has been the size of Ulu Muda, you know, to make sense of the elephant population. Amran, is there, again, are parks sufficiently well run?
From the perspective of conservation, they are very well run. So if you look at all the parks that are under the government agencies, they know, you know, what they have to do in terms of conservation. But in terms of tourism, ecotourism, maybe we can do better. So I like to go back to, you know, we should make more money, not because we want to, you know, just make money, but do you know how much we are charging to enter our national parks? 5 ringgit, 10 ringgit? And the Thais are laughing at us, you know, Thai national parks. So if you
They charge much more.
They charge much more. So if you're charging 5 to 10 ringgit for, you know, a world-class tourist experience, so how are you going to get the money to reinvest in tourism? So, in conservation. So the first challenge here is how do we change the legislations to allow for the authorities, the agencies to collect higher entrance fee so that the charges can add to the income that half of it could be reinvested in conservation. And to do this, we have already proposed in the National Ecotourism Plan what is called tourism concessions. You know? So in Malaysia, most of our parks are managed by the government agencies, and they are all under pressure because they have to do conservation, which they are very good at, and they have to do now ecotourism. Maybe they could do better. You know? So tourism concessions is how do you empower suitably qualified the private sector to run the tourism business in a very professional way and charge more, so that the government agency then just have to focus on conservation. Sabah parks, they have got Kinabalu Park is run under a wonderful concession. Habitat, one of the first and the best tourism concessions in Peninsular Malaysia. Concessions have been in here for a long time, but they are only given for 2 years. What can you do? 2 years. We need 25 years, 30 years, 50 years concession, so that you know the company under strict guidelines from the agencies then can make money. And this is why the synergy between ecotourism and conservation can really, you know, be achieved. But it's very difficult because we have been working in silo most of the time.
Okay, all right. Another quick break and we'll continue this conversation in a couple minutes. Stay tuned. Thank you so much for staying with us on Consider This. I'm Melisa. Idris. With me is Sharaad, Kuttan. We're speaking to Amran and Justine tonight about ecotourism and conservation. And I wanted to ask you, Justine, about the impact of COVID and the lockdown and closed borders, and that the collapse of tourism and the impact to the environment. I wanted to ask you what that means now that, you know, these foreign tourist dollars have evaporated in the past few months.
Right. So, I mean, because we have our, through our network, we have realized how badly people are suffering. We lost international tourists as well as the domestic tourists during the MCOs. So a lot of conservation projects also derive a lot of their income, enough income to keep their operations going from visitors. And it became the point where we actually, you know, asking for support and so on. But there is a whole community that surrounds nature attractions, you know, in terms of boats, transport, food, and the list goes on. Everyone is affected. And so we are now in a situation where we do need to rely on the domestic market, other Malaysians, to visit nature attractions, which they might not know much about.
But is it a question of not knowing, or is it something they're not necessarily interested in? Because ecotourism seems to appeal to somebody who has a particular sensitivity to what's happening in a planetary sense, who has sensibilities that they want a special relationship to nature. Malaysians do. I know we like to eat, and we like to eat cheap and good.
Yes.
Do we want to do much more with our tourist experience?
I see.
What do you think?
I use this term social construct of nature. You know, when Taman Negara was established many years ago, the social construct of Taman Negara is a place for tranquility, you know, solitude, and now it has changed because most domestic tourists, when we go to Taman Negara Royal Belum, they are going there to be with friends for merriment, you know. So the association with nature, you know, is maybe lesser than they were, you know.
Right.
So this is how
nature is kind of a backdrop to the
right,
things that you would do
backdrop.
anywhere in the world, right?
You talked a little bit earlier about a lack of awareness of these places, and
Yes.
I also think that I'm wondering whether there's a lack of awareness of how to visit these places, how to be an ethical eco-tourist.
Right.
And if you were to educate people who may not know, Malaysians who may not know what it means to go and visit an area that you want to conserve the biodiversity, what would you tell them?
Don't litter.
all those are very basic, but if you go to a marine park, you know, most of our islands are marine park, and most of our locals, we don't know that they are marine parks. So once they land on the islands, they should be told, this is a marine park, and the guides, before they take them to for snorkeling, they should tell them, this is how you behave. So education is very crucial.
Yes.
And the idea that you are going to an island is not to have fun only, you know, although that is very important to the experience, but conservation, how do you contribute towards conservation is crucial. But this is where education is important. This is where visitor management is very important.
Right.
You talk about, one last comment is that, you know, Sabah. Sabah is well known. You have Kinabalu Park, you have Danum Valley. It should be a premier ecotourism destination, you know, but we are not charging that kind of price because tourists, when they experience a world-class destination, and they are willing to pay a premium. And why are we underselling?
But will locals accept it? I mean, the local people feel that, well, this is our heritage.
Yeah.
Why are you pricing it out of our ability to access these sites?
I don't know. I have a suspicion that the fact that people had the opportunity to travel cheaply to the region and other countries made that, oh, let's do that first. It's not like they're not interested in Malaysia. And I think that the more that they learn about it and also realize that you can actually travel and support your fellow Malaysians and learn about other cultures, and there's so many things that you didn't know that you wanted to go and do, I think people will make the right decision. And in actual fact, they are doing that. You know, as soon as the MCO was lifted, every man and their tuition teacher was in Redang.
That's true.
And you know,
Every man
they
with a
needed
tuition
to get out. And
Okay, can
there
I
was
ask
need
you
for that outlet.
whether this pandemic is a chance for us to redo things, rethink things, especially in a policy point of view?
Yeah,
Justine.
I absolutely believe that it must be, and we definitely need to be complemented by building. You know, everyone said build back better. We absolutely need build back better, and we need to expect more of ourselves. So we have a reset opportunity. So I think, you know, the point of these sorts of discussions was to get collaboration. Conservationists talking to the tourism sector, talking to the business sector, and using all this social media that we have to sort of raise the bar a little bit. I think so.
Amran?
Yes, with COVID-19, it's a shock to the equilibrium. People say that it will never recover. It will never gain back, you know, that equilibrium, meaning that mass tourism maybe will not be that prominent anymore. There will be a new tourism landscape that will emerge maybe 3 to 4 years from now. There's already signs showing that people are looking more for space, you know, spacious areas, natural areas. So ecotourism will be, whether it's terrestrial, whether it's marine, you will see a lot of demand for such kinds of experience. But as we open up more and more such areas, how do you manage them? You know, this will be a huge challenge because there will be huge demand for people to visit and experience ecotourism. But then with this demand, how do you manage their behavior? I'm not worried about numbers. You know, carrying capacity, numbers, it's okay. But behavior is more crucial. How do you manage them so that they behave? Small numbers, if they don't behave well, can also cause huge impacts.
So behavior of both the purveyors of ecotourism and also those ecotourists as well. Thank you both for being on the show tonight.
Okay.
A pleasure it's been speaking to you both.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you
Thank you for having us.
That's all the time we have on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching, folks. Good night.